Part 77. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 761. The bald king was slightly stunned after hearing Lord Im's words, but soon he nodded and agreed. Lord Im doesn't care about the success or failure of the navy at all, nor does he care about this matter. What kind of waves this war will bring, and what kind of hell the world will become. She didn't care at all that the navy had been ruined after 20 years of hard work. Just kidding, she is now a person who doesn't even care about the world government, let alone the navy. All she values is Orgrim. In fact, judging from the situation just now, if she could block Orgrim, the navy would not be overwhelmed by Orgrim's extremely powerful personal strength to the current point. But she was just watching the show. Except for the fact that she punched Orgrim in the beginning when Orgrim wanted to hit her to death with a hammer, she had been watching the show until now. At the same time, she was also biding her time. Wait until dark. According to rumors, Orgrim is truly in its complete state under the Dark Night. Im is also very interested in this, and she will not do anything to Orgrim again before dark. She hoped that she could face the strongest Orgrim. This is worthy of her status as the king of the world. But before that, this war and this showdown between masters also interested Lord Im very much. Therefore, she is also very happy that before night falls, Orgrim and these masters can give her a more interesting performance. Therefore, she asked the bald king to tell the navy and agree to Orgrim's proposal. It can also be seen from this that the future of the navy and the situation of the world are not as important as the good show in front of you. This is because the location you are in is different, and what you want is naturally different. Lady Im is completely willful, she doesn't care about this. But the bald king is at a lower level than Lord Im. But what's weird is that he doesn't care whether the navy wins or loses. He hedged his bets anyway. If the navy can win, it doesn't matter. If the navy loses, they won't lose. More importantly, he doesn't need to think about winning or losing at all now, and what kind of changes it will bring to the world later. He only knew that if he couldn't pass the test of Lord Im in front of him now, he would definitely not be able to see the sun rise tomorrow morning. Compared with this, the navy and the future are unimportant. This sounds cruel. In today's multi-party game, only the navy itself really cares about victory. The big bosses above would rather lose the interests of the navy than protect their own interests. This is really a sad thing. However, the reality is often so cruel. It is not unreasonable to say that the butt determines the head. Sometimes it really doesn't matter what is right or wrong, it's just that the position of sitting is different, so the direction of thinking is different, and the conclusions drawn are different. Listening to the words of the bald king next to him, the warring states marshal also felt a little sad in his brows. What Durag said decades ago, the limitations of the navy's justice, today, are completely revealed in front of many generals in the navy. It is true that it is a blow, but at the same time, it also strengthens the determination of people with lofty ideals like Jun to reform the navy in the future. I don't want it to be like this, but during the warring states period, besides this, does the navy have any other chances to win? Do it well, and if you want to win, beat him. After the bald king warned him, he quickly left here without waiting for the warring states marshal to reply. He has no ability to protect himself in such a chaotic battle between masters. Marshal Warring States took a deep breath and adjusted his condition. In fact, if you think about it carefully, Wulaoxing is right. Orgrim's extremely powerful strength makes it unnecessary to display many of the navy's layouts. Because it cannot be used as a bargaining chip to shake the balance of victory. To talk about where the general died in this battle, it was because of Orgrim's excessive strength. With the posture of one person, the scale of victory is tilted to the point where it cannot be turned over. Therefore, the only chance of victory is to seize Orgrim's arrogance, and all the navy's masters come together to kill this bastard in one go. Thinking of this, The warring states marshal looked at Orgrim and said solemnly, "Okay." There was no more words. In fact, the warring states marshal was so aggrieved that he didn't want to say a word. When Orgrim heard this, he grinned and waved his hands to the people behind him, signaling them to step back. Sphinx raised his head and glanced at Beckman beside him, as if waiting for him to speak. Master Chui wants to challenge the masters of the Navy headquarters alone. Isn't it too much? Beckman glanced at Orgrim's back seriously. After a long time, he sighed and said, "This guy is still so willful. Back off." Beckman is not a fool. Of course he can see that with the current situation, Orgrim doesn't have to talk nonsense with the naval marshal of the warring states period. There is no need to single out the Navy headquarters. We can go up together and rely on our strength. The advantage can completely win the victory. However, Orgrim wants to be so willful. But Beckman can understand him. He knows very well that his big brother seems complicated, but in fact, there is also a very pure obsession in his heart. That is to compete with the heroes of the world. From the beginning to the end, he knew that Orgrim has not given up on this idea. Now, on the pirate side, Orgrim has defeated all his opponents. As for the Navy, he is about to perform his grand performance. He clearly knows that this is his brother's willfulness and is not the best choice, but Beckman still chooses to support it. Perhaps the most important thing in Beckman's heart is his brother Orgrim. "This is not a wise choice," Barrett said suddenly. But after a slight pause, he smiled again and said, "But I can understand it." He could indeed understand, but he didn't explain much. While retreating, he looked at Beckman and asked, "Although I have great confidence in the captain, Beckman, if the captain loses?" A fierce look flashed in Beckman's eyes, and he said in a deep voice, "This is a war, not to mention, when do we pirates start to need to talk morally with the Navy?" Beckman did this kind of thing without any pressure. To put it mildly, this could even be called despicable, but to put it nicely, it's also a ploy. "It's really your style," Barrett smiled evilly and said. On the other side, the Whitebeard pirates were also retreating. Marco frowned and looked at Orgrim's back, and then said in a helpless tone, "Old Dad, this guy is going too far, won't you stop him?" Newgate's eyes were a little vague. After listening to Marco's words, he shook his head and said, "You don't understand Orgrim at all. This kind of thing cannot be stopped. In fact, from the beginning, I expected that it might happen. This scene occurs because, Orgrim, essentially, a complete lunatic." Newgate looked at Orgrim's back and seemed to recall the fight between the two on Butter Island a long time ago. In that battle, Orgrim would rather die than sink into the sea with him. Reluctant to be the first to bow his head. From then on, Newgate knew that Orgrim was definitely a lunatic. Of course, so was he himself. But now, he has removed the strongest shackles, and many things have changed. There is no longer so much persistence. If he were to fight Orgrim now, Newgate would only do what he can. He would not fight Orgrim to the death like he did back then. He had done the most being strong. He naturally understood the pressure Orgrim had to bear when he was known as the strongest. The pirates retreated, and the Navy bosses were all serious. Orgrim took the war hammer. He was pulled up from the ground, and his eyes became much more serious. Although he was arrogant, he was not arrogant. This battle at Marineford may be his last battle, whether it is the Navy or. Thinking of this, Orgrim also looked at Lord Im in the distance. At this time, he had come to his senses. What could make the bald king treat him like this was the woman who appeared here inexplicably and looked like she was only in her 20s. It should be the mysterious Lord Im. She is also his opponent. Although I don't know why she didn't take action, what was she waiting for? But it doesn't matter, anyway, today, he will defeat the Navy and this Lord Im. After this battle, there may be no opponent worthy of his attack in the world. When the time comes, go back to Avalon to retire. It's time to give up time to young people. No one spoke. Orgrim was very quiet, and the navy was also quite quiet. It seemed like he was waiting for something. After a while, a golden light flashed and landed next to the warring states marshal. It was Porisalino. Although he looked a little embarrassed, he seemed to be fine. Orgrim did not look back, but he could feel the presence of Kaido standing next to Whitebeard. Orgrim was really thankful that he didn't come up to cause trouble. Although he didn't know what happened before, Porisalino knew from the atmosphere what was about to happen here. Orgrim didn't say anything to object, which proved that he could take action. Orgrim would naturally not object. On the contrary, he was even more looking forward to this intense pressure. Just when the atmosphere was so oppressive that it made people breathless, Orgrim moved. A flash of light flashed in his eyes, and he exerted force under his feet. His figure was like a tiger, and with a surging momentum, he rushed towards the navy first. It was as if he was the one with the strength in numbers. The strong force of the impact wound around him, causing the ground to crack inch by inch wherever it passed. Just the momentum coming towards them made all the navy bosses tremble with fear. But after being shocked, we still have to fight. The cold light came out of its sheath, and an inexplicable energy spread from Fujitori's hand and hit Orgrim directly. Gravity knife tiger, Fujitora smiled and shouted in a deep voice. Invisible gravity, like a tiger, rushed towards Orgrim. The heavy warhammer circled in Orgrim's hand, pulling out the windmill-like flower shadow, and the powerful impact force, it was like rolling marshmallows, being rotated and wrapped around the doom hammer. Without any hesitation, facing the tiger transformed by gravity, Orgrim fell with the hammer. The tiger collapsed suddenly, and the force of gravity and impact the power was unleashed wantonly, and the ground cracked open. It was also at this moment that many masters of the navy moved. The golden light flashed, and Porisalino passed through the chaotic energy tide, and in an instant, he appeared in Ogre Mew's side. Before the kick was lifted, his face changed. The golden light flashed and he fled at an extremely fast speed. The next moment, the strong impact force directly hit Porisalino just now. The location where he was exploded together with the space. It was Orgrim's warhammer. With a swing of the hammer, the figure of Chadojiaji also appeared next to Orgrim, with a cold light flashing in his hand. The blade struck directly at Orgrim's side. "Get out of here," Orgrim reacted very quickly and hit the blade with his elbow. There was a faint sound of dragon roar, erupting from his elbow. The Tyrannosaurus charged the elbow. With the point of the Arankar, this blow directly knocked Gyokai's hand. The blade broke instantly, and the powerful impact was released, sweeping this wretched guy away together. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 762. The hot and violent breath hit his face. Sure enough, Sakazuki, the iron-headed boy, still chose to break through head-on. Orgrim didn't know whether to praise him for his perseverance or to say that there was something wrong with his mind. Before, he could choose to take Sakazuki's magma fist forcefully. After all, there were no other enemies around at that time. But now, Orgrim didn't dare to take Sakazuki's fist randomly. Sakazuki's fist is indeed not that easy to catch. If he is caught, the others can take away Orgrim. As soon as his steps stopped, the ground suddenly collapsed. Orgrim pulled the warhammer and struck out from in front of him with a bottom-up blow. This hammer happened to hit the crook of Sakazuki's arm. The powerful impact instantly deflected Sakazuki's offensive trajectory. The magma strike grazed Orgrim's ear and ignited the hair on the side. As soon as his hand was released, the warhammer came out and flew into the air. At the same time, Orgrim's arm happened to cross with Sakazuki's arm. "Thunderplow hot knife," Orgrim shouted violently. He exerted force from his body, and his center of gravity surged forward. The ground that his front feet stepped on was already cracked. Now, with this force, the cracks on the ground were directly turned into powder. Boom! A blow. As if it was about to blow everything apart, it hit Sakaski's armpit and ribs with great force. Even with Sakaski's strength, when he took this blow, his face turned red, magma shot out, and a stream of blood spat out of his mouth. The strong figure was like a magma cannon, spraying magma all the way and shooting out. Before Orgrim could retract his movements, the ground beneath his feet collapsed again. There were no cracks, but it felt like it was directly compacted, and it collapsed downwards. Rich gravity suppression appeared on Orgrim's body out of thin air. This made his movements slow down. This is undoubtedly a flaw. Jun has no awareness that the man in front of him is his man. The moment Fujitora controlled Orgrim with a smile, the Jinpura in her hand, with a sharp aura, pierced Orgrim's heart. "Drink," Orgrim shouted loudly, briefly breaking the suppression of gravity. However, the blade had already broken through the distance at this time, and was just a hair away from piercing the chest. There was no time to dodge, and there was no way to dodge. A fierce flash flashed in his eyes. Color, Orgrim's body turned aside, and in the next moment, a flash of blood appeared. The Jinpura in Jun's hand directly penetrated Orgrim's chest. The blade broke through the muscles on the back, exposing it with blood beads. In the air. Fortunately, Orgrim's deflection can be regarded as avoiding the heart. Although the knife penetrated the body, the real injury was not very serious. Strong people have many instincts. They are all quite terrifying. For example, injuries that are not particularly painful generally cannot affect their counterattack. Jun's blow looked powerful, but it did not make Orgrim feel too painful to live. Therefore, after stabbing with the blade, at the same time as his muscles were broken, Orgrim used his backhand to directly grab Jun's head, which was in front of him. The muscles in his arms surged, the meridians bulged, and with powerful force, he pressed Jun's head. It was covered with the ground. Jun's delicate and beautiful face came into contact with the ground intimately. Then, the strong pressure instantly shattered the ground, and half of her head was smashed into the ground, splashing out. A bloody flower. To say that Jun had fought Orgrim before and was severely beaten by Orgrim. It can be said that it was Orgrim's unconscious counterattack. This time, everyone completely recognized the bastard Orgrim. He is cruel and ruthless. Just like what Queen Stacy said about Orgrim many years ago. He is a person who likes beauty and cannot even withstand the temptation of beauty. But there is no doubt that Orgrim is not a man who will be entangled by women. When nothing happens, he will give in to you in every possible way. Once you block his way, he will kill people without any mercy. Knock him down with one blow. Jun, Orgrim still didn't stop, and kicked out suddenly, directly on Jun's stomach, sending her flying out. At the same time, a strong wind blew towards her face, and the man named the huge mechanical arm of the smash strike is already in front of you. With a domineering twist in his hand, the second stage of power called Flowing Sakura in Wano country burst out directly. He twisted his waist, took a step back, and swung, taking a posture that was easier to exert force. Orgrim punched the smashing blow. Even though the sea tower stone was extremely strong, this blow directly broke some parts of the smashing strike. It was supposed to be the process of wrestling in an instant. No matter how long it lasts, there should always be a moment of wrestling. But when Orgrim landed a punch, he failed to feel the powerful hedging force that it should have had. Sci-fi certainly cannot be weak. He was unable to resist himself. Sure enough, with a click sound, the crushing strike disintegrated. Inside the disintegrated crushing strike, a black arm wrapped with domineering energy was revealed, which was Sci-fi's arm. Is also a prosthetic arm. It is quite exquisite. The material is not clear, but it looks like a real flesh and blood arm. This huge power arm of Shatter actually has two stages of form. Sci-fi moves extremely fast. This at that time, Orgrim dispelled the smashing attack with a punch, and his posture was just like the empty door was wide open. This full-strength blow with the conviction of a veteran general hit Orgrim hard on the chest like a hammer. Visible to the naked eye, the muscles in his chest collapsed inward, and the faint sound of ribs breaking could be heard. At this time, Jinbaluo, who was still stuck on Orgrim's body, shook out a blade. His feet staggered, but when he landed, Orgrim also stabilized his figure. He used his backhand to lock the neck of Zifa, who was approaching. Zephyr's reaction was equally quick. He lowered his head and directly bypassed Orgrim's arm. But just when he was about to punch again, Orgrim got the timing and distance right, and his knee was ejected directly. A knee hit Zifa's chest, which was lowered. Cough. Zifa's feet were half a meter above the ground as a result of the blow, and his body arched up. At the same time, Orgrim also retracted the fist that shatter, and punched Zifa with a powerful punch. Frozen time capsule, Kuzan shouted in a low voice. Just when Orgrim's fist was about to fall on Zifa, the frost-white freezing air froze Orgrim to death with lightning speed. But it was only for a moment. The ice burst into pieces instantly, and Orgrim's punch followed the previous trajectory. But this moment was enough for Zifa to dodge. His feet landed on the ground. At the same time, a lazy donkey rolled around, not caring about demeanor or face at all, using the most embarrassing but most effective posture to avoid Orgrim's air-blasting punch. At the same time, a laser beam instantly hit Orgrim's chest and penetrated directly, opening a puncture wound as thick as a thumb. The blood and the wound seemed to be instantly burned by the laser, and there was no scene of bleeding. Then, the invisible gravity once again enveloped Orgrim. A series of blows caught him off guard. For a while, he was unable to break free from the shackles of gravity. Death by punch. At this moment, Garp, a top veteran, seized the opportunity, rushed in front of Orgrim, faced Orgrim's head, and punched it. The pinnacle blow. Powerful punching power, lifted Orgrim up from the ground, flew 3 or 2 meters, and then slammed it to the ground. But the powerful force still did not vent, and quickly swept Orgrim and rolled backwards. More than 10 meters away. Don't underestimate justice. Garp tore off his tattered suit, revealing his solid and muscular body, and said in a very sonorous and powerful tone. There are countless scars on his body, witnessing the journey of this naval hero. It's been a long journey. In the first round, the Navy had the advantage. Orgrim, who took the lead in launching the fierce attack, was repelled in embarrassment. Jun, Sakaski, and others, who had been repelled by Orgrim before, at this time, he also returned to the team and stood beside Garp, forming a formation with Garp as the leader. At first glance, it looked really menacing, a bit like the first day of the Navy's combat force. Cough. Orgrim put one hand on the ground and spat out a mouthful of old blood. Although the movement was not fast, it was very powerful, and there was no feeling of weakness. He stood up again slowly but steadily. When he raised his head, all the Navy masters felt awe in their hearts. Orgrim's eyes seemed to have become even more crazy and ferocious, faintly flashing with scarlet brilliance. Then, his aura also changed. Before, it was just ferocious and powerful, but now it has become violent and crazy, as if it might choose someone to devour at any time. Invisible energy shook his body, and the Jun sword Kinpura inserted in his chest was ejected directly by the rebound. Then, everyone saw that Orgrim's strong body had expanded again. The muscles that were already full of tension became even more visually impactful. But after 3 or 5 breaths, the swollen muscles and body quickly collapsed inward. This is his inexplicable ability that can effectively improve his physical fitness in a short period of time. Jun saw this and spoke quickly. There was a lot of blood on her face, and even on her cheekbones, there was a wound, which was so deep that the bones could be seen. If it weren't for the fact that there are many weird medical methods in this world, Jun's would almost be considered his face was disfigured, and the bridge of his nose seemed to have collapsed. Zifa was biting his asthma medicine, took 2 deep breaths and said, "Yes, in this state, he is very strong." Orgrim moved his shoulders left and right, feeling the force of the impact, which was constantly rushing through his body. The blood surged rapidly, making the whites of his eyes gradually become congested and became scarlet. Restless, the heart seemed to be beating out of the chest. From far away, one could hear the fierce beating sound of the heart. The fists were punched in front of the chest, and the dark-armed domineering force instantly Orgrim's fist covered. "The second round begins," Orgrim said with a ferocious smile. The moment the words fell, the ground shook, and Orgrim's figure disappeared on the spot. But the Navy masters were still able to keep up. It was Shao. Step, a shave step that is extremely fast. The domineering power of the sight spread out instantly, and Garp punched the air in front of him. Sure enough, the next second, Orgrim's figure appeared here. He punched Garp with the same punch. The 2 fists intersected, and Orgrim's powerful power instantly overwhelmed Garp and sent him flying away with 1 punch. Then, Orgrim's feet shattered, and the figure was like a cannonball, chasing after Garp's flying figure. Jun was shocked. Naturally, he couldn't let Orgrim take Garp away in one breath. He raised his leg and swept out with 1 kick to stop him. Orgrim's path was blocked. I don't know if Orgrim didn't mean to hide with this kick, or for some other reason. He kicked Orgrim directly on his side and waist. A powerful force spread out. At the same time, Orgrim also tumbled out. But looking at the corners of Orgrim's raised mouth, Jun said with a hint of anger in his eyes, "Smile. It's too late." Orgrim, who was staggering, immediately steadied himself. At the same time, he backhanded a left hook with domineering and impactful force, hitting Fujitora Uxiao's head directly. "It's you. You bastard, you keep giving me those special control skills. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 763. This punch really hit Fujitora, who was a little confused with a smile. A strong fist pressed against his face, completely deforming his chubby and naive appearance. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and his teeth became much looser. The tall and muscular figure was instantly knocked down by Orgrim's punch. This blow made Fujitora smile, and his thoughts were running wild. His head was dizzy and his thinking was much slower. Because of this, he was unable to make an effective counterattack or resistance at all. Orgrim knocked down Fujitora with 1 punch and smiled, his movements not stopping at all. A backhand elbow hit Fujitora on the chest before he fell to the ground with a smile. "Open," Orgrim shouted violently. A powerful shockwave instantly erupted from the elbow strike, sending Fujitora flying away with a smile. The next second, he crossed his arms and blocked them by his side. Jun, the kick hit the arm hard, forcing Orgrim to take 2 steps back. A golden light scattered. An evil smile appeared on the corner of Orgrim's mouth, his arms shook, and he directly opened Jun. With a kick, he hit the laser with a punch. An explosion spread out from his fist on the spot. Thick smoke instantly covered Orgrim. Magma and cold air spread to the left and right. In the smoke, before the Navy could breathe a sigh of relief, it turned out that Orgrim was not restrained by Sakaski and Kyuzan at all. He rushed out of the smoke and crashed into Jun. "Don't underestimate me, you bastard," Jun shouted angrily, and without dodging, he also hit Orgrim. Bang, bang, bang. The 2 fists and kicks intertwined. In an instant, they launched several sets of moves, and they were blocked by parries. Then, Watch Kyuzan, Porisalino, Sakaski and others also pressed beside these 2 people without saying a word. Originally, it was impossible for Jun to block Orgrim with fists and kicks. But Kuzan, the entrance of Porosalino and Sakaski, greatly relieved her pressure. The joint attack of the Navy's top masters also had a high degree of tacit understanding. The energy continued to overflow, and in a moment, it really suppressed Orgrim. In the distance, Bartholomew Bear still said nothing, standing quietly beside the Warring States Marshal. The Warring States Marshal's expression was quite serious at this time. He did not take action. In fact, it was not his turn to take action. Even if it is a chaotic battle with one enemy against many, it does not mean that the party with more people can attack them all at once. There is also a degree of tolerance in this. After reaching a certain level, no matter how many people there are, it will make it difficult for one side to perform. It is just right at this time. If there are more people, it will cause flaws in the Navy's tacit understanding and joint attack. The remaining masters can serve as substitutes, bringing the combined attack and will battle to the extreme. Logically speaking, this kind of tactical operation is indeed a reasonable arrangement to fight one more person. But the Warring States Marshal is still quite uneasy at this time. Orgrim's endurance, thanks to his physical fitness, it is really outrageous. I am afraid that even this kind of continuous high-intensity combat will not be able to crush him. And once thinking of this, the Warring States Marshal raised his head and looked into the distance. Endless glaciers came into view. The sun in the sky was setting towards the end of the glaciers. Once it gets dark, I'm afraid no one can control this ferocious beast anymore. The most annoying thing is that the Warring States Marshal knew that there would be such hidden worries, but there was nothing he could do against Orgrim. Everything that needs to be done has been done, and all the moves that need to be made have been taken. What more can be done to him? In the Marineford battlefield, the pirates were still fighting with the Navy at this time. On the edge of the battlefield, a group of people sneaked up from the glacier. Is this war? I feel like when I fought against the Navy in the past, what I saw was just childish. Kid swallowed as he looked at the scene of countless people fighting. He has never seen such a scene in his entire life. In the past, I always heard people say that the Warhammer pirates started some kind of war in the New World, and I thought that was just what happened. Today is an eye-opener, right? Kid, Kira also said in shock. The two of them can be regarded as out-and-out pirates. They burned, killed, looted, and committed all kinds of evil. I thought they should be models among pirates. But I saw it today. What do they mean? The top pirate launched a war of hundreds of thousands of people and stormed Marine headquarters Marineford. I am afraid that on this battlefield, he, Eustace Kid, is just a slightly stronger bastard, right? In fact, that's really true. Maybe even the 4 words slightly strong are not worthy of it. Hey, Andre, has your Warhammer pirates often started wars of this level in the New World before? Kid turned around and asked Andrest, who was also observing the battlefield next to him. Andrest was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and said it's not often. In fact, I have never participated in it once, let alone I have never observed it closely. In terms of scale, this should be the 3rd time. Not long after I was born, my father started a war between the 4 emperors of the New World. Then, a few years ago, in order to unify the power of the pirate camp in the New World, he launched a battle for the pirate kingship. Although he did not witness it with his own eyes, however, I heard that these 2 wars included the entire New World. The major forces continued to conquer the New World. From a macro perspective, the number of participating troops was probably even greater than here, right? Kid was stunned for a moment when he heard this. In fact, even though Kid is the 2nd supernova, he is indeed a complete newcomer with no culture and little understanding of the New World. Before that, although he always hears people saying how powerful the Warhammer pirates are. But in his impression, or in other words, the pirates he met, including himself, all have similar patterns. The powerful can be powerful. Where to go? There is a big fleet or something, right? Occupying an island called Avalon in the New World. This was his impression and fantasy of the Warhammer pirates. Now, it was directly broken. This concept. Hey, how many people do you have under me? Kid thought for a moment and asked in a deep voice. How many people? And Dressed was confused, he really didn't know. He turned to look at Yamato, who also shook his head, as if she didn't understand either. Trafalgar Law and Ace not to mention, neither of them paid attention to these things. On the contrary, Nami smiled confidently and said that may be beyond your imagination. Kid, take a guess first. Kid frowned and looked at the battlefield. Then he pondered for a moment and said, 1 million, no. Too many, 500,000. Ha 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 ha, Nami laughed. Kid asked angrily, how many are there? Why are you laughing? I just feel, it turns out the gap is so big, Nami said with a smile. After a pause, Nami straightened her face and said, at the beginning of the year 1520 in the ocean calendar, the Warhammer pirates conducted a census. The population of the core Avalon Islands alone has exceeded 24 million. It is closed. Judging from the entire Eternal Night Sea, which has been radiated out, including the directly affiliated Don Quixote family and other territories, under the rule of Lord Hammer, the total population is as high as 87 million. You must know that this is normal. There is a resident population, but on the sea, there are countless floating populations. Therefore, theoretically speaking, under Mr. Chewy's rule, I'm afraid there are over 100 million people. 100 million, everyone in Kid is dumbfounded. Other pirates are still building a fleet. They can only use a few thousand people, but if they are more powerful, tens of thousands of them can be called the Pirate Admiral and dominate the area. The result is good. You Warhammer see, do all pirate groups play on the scale of 100 million? For a moment, Kid even felt that One Piece had nothing to do with him and he couldn't compete with him. Kid, that's just the population under his rule, not his younger brother, Kira quickly explained. But Kid's expression was still a bit shocked as he said, even so, calculated as 1%, he has at least 1 million people under his command. In this war, Mr. Chewy invested all his elite forces, up to 200,000 troops. While launching this war, the number of troops stationed in various places was also increasing, 1 million. You have underestimated the Warhammer pirates. Let me tell you, the Warhammer pirates are completely different from the pirate groups you have seen and heard about, is unique, Nami said softly. She actually didn't know how powerful the Warhammer pirates were. But, I have to say that it is a fact that the Warhammer pirates are the dominant family in the entire New World. The Warhammer pirates' subordinates, islands are as numerous as stars in the New World, and every island that hangs the flag of the Warhammer pirates will have a garrison of the Warhammer pirates. At the same time, with the Avalon Islands as the main body, the nationalization of pirates has progressed to a very deep level. She doesn't know how to calculate these. Of course, in terms of military strength, it can't compare with the Navy. Stop saying these meaningless words. Why does something feel wrong? Why didn't anyone except Master Mihawk do anything? Is my dad fighting one against many? And Dressed first looked back and saw two tiny figures on the glacier outside Marineford Sea in the distance. Then he looked at the ruins of the execution platform and said strangely. Those two tiny figures, the figures are naturally Mihawk and Shanks, who are getting further and further away. Betray? Kid said directly. As soon as he finished speaking, Runty punched him on the head and cursed, no one in the Warhammer pirates will betray Master Hammer, you idiot, do you want to die? Don't worry so much. Lord Orgrim will definitely be fine. What should we do? Join the battle? Just us? Trafalgar Law asked. Ace grinned, lit up a flame, and said with a smile, come in, okay, Anyway, I am a natural person and not afraid of death. On this battlefield, there are as many people as stars who can use the power of domineering. Don't be too confident. Andrest glanced at the battlefield and said. Then, as if he saw someone, his eyes lit up. It's Aaron, Andrest pointed at the battlefield and said. Nami looked over first, and then said very worriedly, he is being besieged. Quick, let's go help him. Nami and Aaron have a very good relationship. Now seeing Aaron covered in blood, seriously injured, and being besieged by the navy, of course she was extremely worried. Superior, Andrest didn't hesitate at all and spoke immediately. Seeing the Eternal Night pirates rushing out, Kiro looked at Kid and asked Kid, what should we do? A ruthless look flashed in Kid's eyes, and he said solemnly, we can't let Andre underestimate us. After receiving so much care from others, of course we have to pay back some, and we will come too. As soon as he finished speaking, Kid flipped out, his abilities surged, and the iron tools scattered on the ground flew towards him quickly. Not to mention, his abilities are really at home in the battlefield. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 764. Aaron was really miserable at this time, feeling like he was at the end of his rope. The peak-cutting sword had broken into a kitchen knife. He was covered in blood and had numerous wounds on his body. It seemed that these injuries were enough to kill him. I'm afraid, at this moment, Aaron is also hanging on himself solely based on his obsession. He didn't know how many people he had killed in this war. But it was worth it after all. At this time, Aaron had already put life and death aside, he just wanted to kill a few more bastard Marines and make some money. But, it can't be done. A Navy Rear Admiral knocked the peak-cutting knife away from Aaron's hand, raised his leg and kicked Aaron on the chest. Kick Aaron down directly. Among pirates, brave guys like you are really rare, the Rear Admiral said in a deep voice. As he finished speaking, he raised his hand and stabbed Aaron's heart with a knife. Fire punch. A roar came. As soon as the Rear Admiral turned his head, the hot flames instantly swallowed him up. The powerful flame she was so powerful that he was knocked away directly. He didn't know whether he was alive or dead. Ace, Aaron was still lying on the ground and said feebly. Then, Nami also rushed here, grabbed Aaron's arm, and asked in a panic, Aaron, are you okay? Aaron is helpless, what do you think? Look at me like this, am I okay? Andrest, Kid, Yamato, Peggy-wan, Runty, and others quickly launched defenses around them and gathered around them. The navy here was all repelled. Then, a group of pirates from the pirate camp came over and fought with the navy, which finally solved the siege on Aaron's side. Get up, Nami, let me see. Trafalgar Law grabbed Nami away, then stretched out his hand and pressed it on Aaron's chest. You're not dead yet, Trafalgar Law felt Aaron's injury and said with some surprise. Normally, a person would have died long ago after suffering such an injury. Murloc, always a little stronger, Aaron smiled weakly and said. Fortunately you met me. As Trafalgar Law spoke, he used his abilities. The strong healing power was quickly transferred from his hands to Aaron's body. The wounds on his body were not healed, but at least they stopped bleeding. As if he also realized that he would not die, Aaron's energy suddenly relaxed. He raised his finger and pointed at the ruins not far away, and said feebly, Tikai. Over there. As soon as he finished speaking, Aaron's arm dropped to the ground with a clatter, his body went limp and there was no movement. Nami was startled, thinking that Aaron was dead. Just when she was about to cry in mourning, Trafalgar Law said, I just fainted. I can't die, but I'm almost there. I can't let it go anymore. He got hurt. On the other side, Ace followed the direction pointed by Aaron and kept rummaging through the ruins. After a while, he lifted up a stone and saw a bloody arm, pressed under the ruins, with a knife on his wrist. The shackles of Sea Tower Stone. A flash of light flashed in Ace's eyes, and he asked in a deep voice, "Are you still alive?" The arm moved slightly, and then he heard a weak voice coming from under the ruins. "If it's a little later, he will die." "Ha ha ha ha, if you can still talk, it proves that you are not dead yet," Ace laughed, and then he lifted up the rocks above. Under the ruins, a weak figure was hidden. It was Blackbeard Marshal D. Teach. There were sea tower stones locked on his legs and hands. He didn't know why the Navy would do this. He was obviously not a devil fruit user yet. But it has to be said that the seafloor stone shackles are much stronger than ordinary shackles, and even Tikai can't break free. After being detained by the Navy for so many days, although Teach was not tortured or anything like that, the Navy would not let him live a particularly easy life. "There is nothing serious about my body, but I am really weak mentally. I was sitting on the execution platform just fine, waiting for my father and Mr. Hammer to save me. The result is good. Mr. Hammer is here." In an unexpected way, the execution platform was completely destroyed. At that time, Teach was smashed into the ruins along with the Warring States Marshal. There was nothing wrong with the Warring States Marshal, but there was something wrong with him, Tikai. Tikai, whose limbs were restrained, was almost crushed to death inside. Then, before he could catch his breath, he crawled out of the ruins. The powerful aftermath of the battle swept him and some of the ruins in, carrying him and flying far away. Dropped in this place. As the war raged on, the gunpowder magazine nearby also exploded. The aftermath of the gunpowder explosion almost killed Teach, an unlucky boy. Then, the collapsed ruins of the gunpowder magazine hit him directly. This time, Teach was even more unlucky and both his legs were broken. At this time, you can see that at the calves of his two legs, the pale leg bones have pierced the muscles and skin and are exposed to the air. It's really terrible. Because of this, Teach was seriously injured and was unable to climb out of the ruins. He could only wait for death quietly here. "By the way, I pray that someone can find me and rescue me quickly." And the person who discovered him was Aaron. But before Aaron could rescue him, the Navy launched a siege on Aaron, causing the previous scene. Ace grabbed Tiki's shoulders and pulled Tiki out of the rubble. It hurts, please be a little gentler," Tiki cried out in pain. "Isn't it just two broken legs?" "Don't worry, it's no big deal," Ace said carelessly. "You bastard, it's not you who broke your leg, of course you can say whatever you want," Teach cursed. "Ha ha 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 ha, you are quite interesting." "Your name is Teach?" Ace asked with a smile. "Well, Marshal D. Teach, the captain of the 2nd Division of the Whitebeard Pirates, one of the main culprits of this war," Teach said weakly. "My name is Ace, Portkas D. Ace, a combatant of the Evernight Pirates," Ace said with a smile. Ace, Tiki was stunned for a moment. He had indeed heard of this guy. Then he grinned and said, "Just for today, you will be my good brother to Tiki from now on." What a life-saving grace. "Hey, Lugo, come and see if his legs can be saved," Ace first shouted to Lugo in the distance, then turned to look at Tiki and said, "Okay, then I will definitely have a drink with you. If it can't be saved, let's amputate it." Lugo was bandaging Aaron's wound over there, and glanced back and said, "He's not from the Eternal Night Pirates and the Warhammer Pirates. What can be saved? Just amputate the leg." Teach. Hey, this doctor, I feel like I can still save you," Tiki said quickly. "Your legs are comminuted fractures. First aid on the battlefield is very troublesome. In order to prevent you from bleeding to death, we can only stop your bleeding and treat your wounds first. Only when an operating table is available can you deal with your injury perfectly. But at that time, it's too late. Moreover, your wound is too large and difficult to treat. It would be best to just amputate directly," Trafalgar Law said very professionally. Of course, it was impossible for Teach to choose amputation. He also hoped that after this war, Orgrim would fulfill his promise and give him the dark fruit. Then he changed his mind, took good care of his father, and provided for Whitebeard until his death. As an outstanding heir, he inherited the legacy of the Whitebeard pirates and his father's abilities. Damn it, now that his leg has been amputated, he doesn't have to mess around anymore. Coach, no, doctor, I still want to be a pirate, Teach said quickly. Before Trafalgar Law could speak, Teach continued, is it really hopeless? Trafalgar Law was silent for a moment, looked at Teach's sincere eyes, and asked softly, why do you still want to be a pirate? Tikai. Do you even need to ask? If I don't become a pirate, what will I do? I haven't repaid my father's kindness yet. After thinking about it, Tikai gave a fairly reliable reason. Anyway, he didn't lie. Indeed, this was also an idea in his mind. Logo, this is my good brother, is there really nothing we can do? Ace also patted his chest at this time and said. Trafalgar Law was helpless. How long have you and this guy named Teach just known each other? Are you such good brothers? But think about it, Ace seems to be still, he really has this kind of personality. He and Kid have become such good brothers not long after they have known each other. It's not like there's no way, as a result of the operation, if Dr. Nightingale had taken action, not to mention curing you, there would be no problem even replacing 2 legs for you. Trafalgar Law thought for a moment and then said. Please, Dr. Tikai said quickly. It's no use asking me, Dr. Nightingale is not someone I can order around. Trafalgar Law waved his hand and said. It doesn't matter, I have a very good relationship with Mr. Chui. After the war is over, he will definitely meet me. Then I will be shameless and talk to him. Teach smiled and said. You have a good relationship with Lord Orgrim? Trafalgar Law asked in surprise. Certainly, Teach said unceremoniously. Trafalgar Law was a little surprised, but if you think about it carefully, this guy committed such a big thing and still walked out of Avalon alive. Maybe Master Chui really admires him. Thinking of this, he decided to use more snacks when bandaging Tikai and make a beautiful bow for the bandage. After all, he is Mr. Chui's friend. At this moment, Aaron, who had already passed out, suddenly opened his eyes and said weakly, the flare, red. But before he could finish his words, he fell into a coma again. Nami found several flares from him, 3 types, red, yellow and green. This, what does it mean? Nami asked a little strangely. It should be about Teach. After all, judging from the superficial purpose of the war, we are all here to save him. There should be instructions before that if Teach is rescued, a red flare will be released, right? Pegawin thought for a while and then said. Makes sense, and Dressed also came over at this time and said. Then I let it go. Nami nodded, then picked up the signal bomb and fired it into the sky. Bang! There was an explosion, and a red smoke exploded in the sky. At the same time, people who were originally watching Orgrim's battle with the Navy Newgate suddenly looked back at the red smoke in the air. His expression stiffened, a little sad, a little sad. Marco also looked shocked, and then quickly supported his father and said, Dad, there's nothing we can do about it. It's all my fault, I forgot about Teach for a moment, Newgate said with great regret. The red smoke signal represents, Teach is found, but dead. On the contrary, the green signal means that Teach has been found and rescued. Yellow means found and seriously injured. Aaron was in a daze at the time and misremembered the meaning of the signal. So much so that Tiki was obviously rescued, but Nami let go, flare of his death. Alas, as expected, there shouldn't be a captain in the position of the 2nd Division, Newgate finally sighed. The mood is a bit complicated. It's all because Dad is watching the show too seriously here. Tikai, Dad is sorry for you. I will definitely burn more paper for you in the future. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 765. Sci-fi, the veteran, was the first to leave. At this time, he was lying on the ground, looking as if he was dead and motionless. Only his chest was still rising and falling slightly, proving that he was still alive. Not far away, Fujitora was half kneeling on the ground with a smile, breathing heavily, his body covered with blood stains, and his honest-looking head was completely disfigured, looking hideous and terrifying. And beside him, there was another person, the T-Dolphin Jiaji. This guy was really in a terrible state. Both arms were broken. The broken bones with bloodshot eyes pierced the muscles and skin of his arms, leaving them bloody and exposed to the air. In the previous battle, this guy seemed to have a sworn enemy with Orgrim. The fight was even more ferocious than Sakaski's, forcing Orgrim to nearly overturn his car several times. Therefore, Orgrim took special care of him. He seized the opportunity and destroyed both his arms in one move. At that time, Orgrim hadn't realized yet. Why did this guy have such hatred and resentment against him? I feel like I have never provoked this bastard. The two had never fought against each other before. In fact, Orgrim had never even met Jiaji. Why did this guy look like he wanted to kill his father when he saw me? It felt like he was being beaten to death, but he had to pull Orgrim down to support him. Even Jiaji's fierce stance made Orgrim vaguely admired. The Navy headquarters is indeed full of talented people, and warriors with righteous hearts are truly a succession of warriors. With these people here, of course the Navy can thrive forever. As a result, Orgrim only reacted after destroying this guy's arms. Damn it, why did this bastard's eyes glow green when he looked at me? After all the fuss, he didn't have the hatred of killing his father, but he still had the hatred of seizing his wife. Earlier, I seemed to have heard some rumors. I guess this guy jumped off a building or something. Thinking about it now, it must be because of his complicated relationship with Jun that made this bastard go crazy. Sure enough, women are a disaster. Sakaski, Kyuzan, and Porisalino are in pretty good shape, but Cap, the big guy, should just do it. Jun was kneeling on the ground at this time, holding himself up with one hand to keep himself from falling. He wanted to stand up, but couldn't. On the side, there was Senior Counselor Ahe supporting her. The great staff officer looked unscathed. In fact, Orgrim did not take action against her. Several times, the old lady tried to use her power to wash away Orgrim, but Orgrim always avoided him. Opened. In the distance opposite, Orgrim stood next to his warhammer. He looked extremely injured. During his slightly rapid breathing, the airflow could bring blood droplets from his lungs. His eyes were scarlet, and the whites of his eyes were almost invisible. A large amount of blood filled the eyeballs, making him look extremely irritable. There were 2 X-shaped wounds on the chest, the skin and flesh were turned out, and broken ribs could be seen in some areas. Vaguely, you can still see several small holes pierced by lasers, hanging on his body. There were no injuries on the 2 arms, but 2 fingers on the left hand were broken, with some flesh still hanging on the palm. It wasn't someone who interrupted it. On the contrary, it was him who hit someone with his fist and the force of the reaction caused it to break. The brow bone at the corner of the eye clearly exploded, and a pale skull could be seen under the skin. Although the injury was extremely serious, Orgrim did not feel weak or exhausted due to his strong physical support. On the contrary, the original injuries on his body were not just like this, but many of them have already recovered. Therefore, Orgrim looks miserable on the surface, but in fact, his combat effectiveness is still very strong. At this time, the sky was gradually getting darker, and even the noise on the battlefield was much quieter. Marineford, the meat grinder, has devoured countless lives. Not long ago, both the Navy generals and the pirate officials began to restrain the actions of both sides, gradually reducing the intensity of the war. Especially after that red smoke exploded in the sky. This means that the first purpose of the pirate camp has failed. Blackbeard Marshal D. Tiki is dead. When the Whitebeard pirates saw this, they naturally had no intention of continuing to fight as the vanguard. The Warhammer pirates have also slowed down and are observing the situation. Orgrim naturally saw the red smoke. He was stunned for a moment and was punched by Sakaski. Teach is dead? Sure enough, the execution platform in Marineford is a poisonous place. If it were Ace, Ace would die here. Let the hard-hit Tiki come over, but Tiki also died. Damn it! As for his feelings and attitude towards Teach, Orgrim naturally felt that he was a despicable person and a shameless person based on his impressions from his previous life. But from the actual contact between the two of them. In fact, Orgrim still admires this guy Teach. Even though he knows that he is kneeling down to lick himself, you have to say that his licking skills are really good. Orgrim felt very comfortable licking him. Secondly, this guy is very courageous and reliable, otherwise Marineford would not be where it is today. The Navy and pirates were both greatly influenced by this guy. Done for Orgrim. Therefore, putting aside his original preconceptions, Orgrim still had a good impression of Teach. It's just a pity, this guy, die young. It's not that I don't want to give you the dark fruit, Teach, it's that you have no life to enjoy it. Coming, Newgate said suddenly. At this time, he was concentrating on observing the battle in Orgrim, as if Teach, who died before, was not his son. Marco heard this and looked back. Sure enough, at the end of the glacier, the last ray of light from the sun was slowly dissipating. Dark night is coming. Dusk, when the devil meets the devil, Jun's eyes were a little unfocused as he murmured. The moment she finished speaking, she suddenly focused her energy, her scattered eyes regained her energy, and with the help of Chief Ahe, she stood up slowly. At dusk, as if it was a signal agreed by both parties, whether it was the Navy or the pirates, the good and the evil who were fighting on the battlefield slowly stopped their killings. The whole of Marineford slowly became quiet. Call, drink, Orgrim's breathing became heavier. Then, visible to the naked eye, Orgrim's broken finger bones began to grow again. On the brow bone, the skull exposed to the air was covered again by the gradually healing flesh and blood. The skin and flesh of the everdead wound on the chest quickly grew granulations and were automatically sewed together. The holes pierced and scorched by Porosalino's laser were gradually filled up. The burns caused by Sakaski and the large area of black scabs began to fall from Orgrim's wounds. Under the charred scabs, there was flesh and blood full of vitality, making up for the injuries. Even though he stood still and didn't move, there was still the sound of crackling bones rubbing against Orgrim's body. His bones, which had been broken and displaced by the beating, began to continuously reset and connect within his body. At this moment, it should be a good time to interrupt Orgrim. But in fact, among the many experts at the Navy headquarters, no one took action rashly. On the contrary, they all put on a very defensive posture. In the previous 3 rounds, although Orgrim took the lead in launching a fierce attack, in fact, the advantage in the battle has always been in the hands of the Navy. The Navy hardly put up any defensive posture, but now, their expressions were quite solemn, and no one dared to act rashly. The power of darkness is constantly surging within the body. If you look carefully, you can see that the dark power that had never been revealed and had been hidden in Orgrim's body now even faintly overflowed from under his skin. Therefore, looking at Orgrim at this time, it is as if he has eaten the dark fruit, with rich dark power flowing out from all over his body. These powers quickly healed his wounds, and his physical strength gradually returned to its peak state. The scarlet bloodshot eyes filled with blood gradually dissipated, and the black and white eyes appeared again. Phew, Orgrim breathed a long sigh of relief, and his expression became comfortable and comfortable. Gee ha 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 ha, it's finally dark. I haven't left Avalon for a long time and moving in the daylight does make me feel a little unnatural, Now, this state that I haven't seen for a long time has made me even more accustomed to it." Orgrim smiled evilly. As his words fell, the dark power that was originally overflowing on the surface of his body gradually shrank into his body, and he no longer felt the dark demon feeling just now. Indeed, Orgrim has lived in a place of eternal night like Avalon for a long time, so this powerful state in the darkness is what he is accustomed to. Perhaps for him, it is no longer in the dark night, he being able to become stronger. It should be the feeling that during the day, he would be half as weak. At this time, there is no pleasure of increased strength. On the contrary, there is only a dull feeling, that is, weakness. Already it has passed. For Orgrim, before, he was fighting in a weak state. Now he is truly going all out. The dark aura disappeared from his body, but then as Orgrim finished speaking, his aura became more and more powerful. Vaguely, the navy bosses seemed to see something gradually solidifying behind Orgrim. It's his momentum. "Tiger. Are you ready to meet the strongest?" Orgrim said with an evil smile. The moment his words fell, his figure had disappeared. On the ground, a strong wind hit, blowing away everything along the way. "So fast," Garp said in shock. He wanted to raise his arm to parry, but he did do this. The instinctive reaction of a strong man should be extremely fast. But even with this extremely fast reaction speed, Garp still he couldn't catch up. He had just raised his arms a few centimeters, and Orgrim's sturdy figure was already throwing himself in front of Garp with strong pressure and momentum. Before he could move, just the momentum that came to his face made Garp, a top veteran expert with many battles, tremble in his heart. The last strike came first. Before Garp could parry with his arms, Orgrim's the fist was already attached to Garp's chest. It seemed like it was in slow motion. Garp's expression slowly became extremely ferocious and nervous, and his eyes instinctively looked at Orgrim's arm. However, in an instant, the movement returned to extremely fast speed. There was a dull thud. In the sight of Sakaski and others, Garp's figure suddenly disappeared, replaced by Orgrim with an evil and ferocious smile on his face. Fast, so fast that they almost couldn't react. Pressure, extremely strong pressure shrouded their hearts. Night fell, and the king of the night, Hosgarot Orgrim, woke up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 766. The hot and violent breath blows towards my face, it's magma. Big fire. Sakaski was the first to react, and he raised his hand and punched. The big fire breath is not a move used to deal with a single target at all. Sakaski's move is often used to deal with groups of enemies. Even the Grand Fleet. But at this time, he made a move with a huge range. Because he didn't know how fast Orgrim was. If it was beyond his imagination, it would undoubtedly be a hit. If you don't hit, just use the range to cover it. No matter whether it's useful or not, it's still a method. For Orgrim, the range of this move is indeed very large, but if you can't avoid it, that's not true. It's possible. Even though the distance between the two sides is very close now, his speed is still enough. But Orgrim did not dodge. The armed domineering energy wrapped around his body, and his whole person turned into darkness. He exerted force under his feet, and the ground collapsed. Broken apart. Then, his figure, illuminated by the fire of the magma, hit Sakaski's large fire-breathing head. The relatively small figure directly crashed through the huge fist of magma. Then, the hot magma rolled down to the ground along the invisible domineering armor on Orgrim's body. Then, the large fire exploded directly on the spot, but it did not affect Orgrim's movements at all. Elementalization. Sakas basically wanted to use elementalization. In fact, he did use it. His feet instantly softened into magma and were about to merge into the ground. But Orgrim's speed was still beyond he reacted. He suddenly grabbed Sakaski's arm with a palm wrapped with domineering power. With a backhand left hook, magma and blood burst out, and Sakaski's head hit him. Shen, he was almost knocked unconscious by this blow. Ice ball. Just when Orgrim was about to knee Sakaski again, a cold light flashed. A touch of cold air froze the magma under the feet of Sakaski and Orgrim. At the same time, Orgrim's legs also climbed up the cold frost. The powerful impact shook him violently, and before the frost and freezing air could completely cover him, it was directly flushed out. But this movement, it was considered as giving Sakaski a chance. Sakaski's head was dizzy, and it was too late to elementalize. He instinctively rolled back and distanced himself from Orgrim. At the same time, a golden light flashed, and the wave Rosalino's figure appeared in front of Orgrim in an instant. At this time, among the navy, the only one who could keep up with Orgrim's speed without any pressure was Porosalino. At the same time as the golden light flashed, Orgrim instinctively raised his arms and blocked them beside his head. He had fought with Porosalino many times, and naturally he knew very well that Porosalino, the bastard, just liked kicking other people's heads. But this time, Orgrim stopped moving, only to find that Porosalino didn't kick like this. On the contrary, when the golden light fell, he pulled out a handful of light beams condensed in his hand. The long sword struck Orgrim's chest, which was wide open in order to parry his head. Porosalino was a man who ruled the roost with speed, and this sword was beyond Orgrim's mind. Rim's expectation was accurate and ruthless. It was impossible to stop him in time at this moment. Just as he saw that the knife was about to hit Orgrim's chest firmly, the corner of Orgrim's mouth put on an evil smile. Shinra Tianzhang, Orgrim shouted in a low voice. A powerful impact burst out of his body at 360 degrees without any dead ends, and was released outward to form a repulsive force. After all, Porosalino's sword was useless. He could fall, but was blocked by the arrogant force of impact. In an instant, his whole body was blown away by the force of the impact. Before Porosalino could land, Orgrim's figure was like a ghost. Generally speaking, I chased him in front of him. Not good, Porosalino was shocked. The Tiankongyun sword in his hand dissipated directly. At the same time, he crossed his arms in front of him, assuming a parrying posture. Sure enough, in the next moment, Orgrim spun half a circle in the air and kicked from top to bottom. The powerful force almost exploded the air in an instant, and the powerful kick landed precisely on the point where Porosalino's arms were crossed. The two arms could not withstand the strength and were pressed on the chest in an instant. At the same time, a blood stain overflowed from the corner of Porosalino's mouth. It was just a pause, but it failed to block the blow. The energy flowed down the arms and through the body. Boom! There was a sudden explosion, and Porosalino's figure was kicked from the air to the ground by Orgrim. The flash energy in his body went wild, setting off a violent explosion. Before Orgrim's pursuit could catch up, a strong wind also exploded around Orgrim. It's Jun. He blocked it by his side, and sure enough, the powerful kick hit Orgrim's arm instantly. Then, the powerful kick force burst out, and Orgrim's figure exploded from the air like a cannonball. Shoot! It wasn't as embarrassing as Porosalino's. Although Jun's kicks had always been very powerful, Orgrim could completely withstand it at this time. As soon as his feet landed on the ground instantly collapsed, but Orgrim's strong figure remained stable. With one step in the air, Jun's posture changed. A sharp cold air exuded from his body. Rabbit fur instantly covered his whole body, entering a state of animal transformation. Boom! With a sound, the air was blown away by her kick. The pink figure pulled out several shadows and rushed towards Orgrim from the air. Moondance frost beat, Jun's eyes instantly turned as red as a rabbit, and the aura on his body exploded again. Obviously, this should be a set of fighting skills created by Jun. But Orgrim had no intention of dodging. He wanted to defeat the Navy's confidence in all directions. He raised and retracted his arms, slightly expanded his legs to the left and right, and sank his waist. Orgrim took a solid stance on the spot and came out. "Iron block black steel," Orgrim said in a deep voice. The moment he finished speaking, the dark domineering energy wrapped around his body seemed to become more solid. The muscles that were still somewhat flexible suddenly tightened, as hard as steel. Just at the same time that Orgrim's horse stance fell, Jun kicked Orgrim violently on the chest. However, Orgrim did not move at all, as if his feet had grown roots. The same, standing firmly on the ground. Only the strong energy was transmitted along his limbs to the ground, causing the ground to crack slightly. After one kick fell, Jun's figure was like a butterfly flying. In front of Orgrim, he fired countless moves in succession. The crackling sound kept coming from Orgrim. But no matter what, Orgrim's figure remained motionless. Jun, after a set of combos, Orgrim used the simplest yet most difficult method to catch them all from the front. Unscathed. The Sengoku Generalissimo was shocked. Jun may have suffered from previous injuries and battles. What not, it is inevitable that he is not at his peak at this time. But no matter how you look at it, Jun's set of fighting skills is full of powerful power. And Orgrim actually dares to be so confident, using such simple and crude methods. How can he withstand Jun's offensive? Is his defensive strength already so abnormal? How can he still fight? At this moment, Orgrim moved, and Jun still kicked him. Orgrim's chest. But Orgrim's arms moved, one to the left and one to the right, like a coiled snake, instantly wrapping around Jun's legs. Oops, Jun was shocked. Seeing Orgrim Tor looking down on himself, Jun's heart was completely occupied by the anger of the offensive. He never expected that this shameless guy Orgrim would change his tactics in an instant. It was extremely dangerous at this time. Jun instinctively wanted to pull the leg back, but it was too late. The arms wrapped around Jun's legs suddenly tightened. In just a moment, there were a few clicks, and Orgrim twisted Jun's calf bone into 3 parts, which was twisted and twisted. Jun cried out in pain. Big beads of sweat instantly flowed from his forehead. Orgrim, who had broken Jun's leg bone, grabbed her neck. I saw Orgrim speaking softly with a cruel smile recently. Whether it is love or hate, these two emotions seem to be unable to support you in gaining the power to defeat me. Jun, you are too weak, leave the show. As soon as he finished speaking, before the tough-talking woman from Jun could say anything else, Orgrim pulled her back, gathered strength for a moment, and threw her backhand away into the distance. After losing one of Jun's legs, coupled with the injuries he had caused to her before, it was obvious that Jun could no longer come out to cause trouble for him. Before Orgrim could take back his action of throwing away Jun, from the corner of his eyes, he looked behind him. He couldn't see clearly, but it was obvious that someone suddenly appeared behind him. Without saying a word, he turned around and took out a punch with his backhand. A powerful impact burst out, but, subtle feel? This blow seemed to have hit a very elastic place. Not only did the arrogant impact force fail to explode, but due to this inexplicable elasticity, Orgrim twisted his wrist and injured himself. With a click, powerful force was affected and acted on Orgrim's own wrist. The wrist is misaligned. However, the impact force still burst out, but what made Orgrim even more uncomfortable was that the impact force was bounced back instantly. In a sudden moment, Orgrim pushed himself back several meters. With a flick of his arm, the dislocated wrist was instantly reset. While squeezing his fist back and forth a few times and moving his wrist, Orgrim looked at this figure. It was exactly as he guessed, King Shishibukai Tyrant Bartholomew Bear. The punch he just struck without looking back was the palm of his chubby palm with cute balls. I don't know if it's an illusion, but it's obviously not very laborious to throw this punch. But Orgrim felt that his physical strength was slightly reduced at this time, as if he had punched 17 or 18 punches with all his strength just now. If Jaws could speak, he would tell Orgrim. It's not an illusion. This Bartholomew Bear can really use his own abilities to fly away the opponent's physical strength. Orgrim has never fought against Bartholomew Bear. But there is no doubt that opponents like Bartholomew Bear are the most difficult to deal with. His abilities were too flashy, but they greatly restrained Orgrim's power. Orgrim, from a personal perspective, what kind of opponent does he like to face the most? That must be someone like Sakaski. Iron-headed boy. He likes this kind of opponent. It's not that Sakaski is weak, in fact, Sakaski is ridiculously strong, but unfortunately, his strength cannot be fully displayed in Orgrim. It's exciting. Beating him is like a father beating his son, 2 words, smooth. On the contrary, Orgrim really didn't like flashy opponents like Bartholomew Bear. Being strong or not is one thing, the key is being difficult. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 767. Still alive, Orgrim suddenly asked Bartholomew Bear. But no one answered him. Bartholomew Bear just stood indifferently in the distance and looked at Orgrim quietly. Indistinctly during this time, it seems that he can feel that this emotionless robot is guarding against him. There is no doubt that Bartholomew Bear is a member of the Revolutionary Army. But what exactly did he do in the Navy, and why? Orgrim didn't know whether it was the mission of the Revolutionary Army or other factors that turned into this situation. In the past, he might have been curious. But now, there is nothing to be curious about. But there is no doubt that, Bartholomew Bear is a powerful guy. To say whether the Yonko is different from the other, in fact, in terms of strength alone, if Bartholomew Bear's background and identity were not so complicated. If he was just as for a pure pirate, Crocodile might not have anything to do with him. In what round will he be the 4 emperors? Even in the original story, Bartholomew Bear is qualified to replace Ti in terms of strength alone. Cheese popular choice. There are rumors that you can deflect all attacks and you are called an invincible tyrant. On the sea, there are really not many people who have the reputation of being invincible, Orgrim said softly. Even Orgrim has never been called invincible, but he is the strongest. It seems to be more powerful than this. Previously, Orgrim was also in the live broadcast and saw the scene where Bartholomew Bear slapped Mihawk's slashes away. There is no doubt that this guy may really be able to deflect all attacks. But, that's what makes it more challenging, isn't it? To deal with him, it is actually not difficult for Orgrim, who is now the most powerful in the world. But Orgrim wanted to try to see if he could defeat his ability. He raised his arms in front of his chest, and his aura of armed domineering gradually became stronger. Soon, the second stage of domineering power condensed on Orgrim's 2 fists. Then, watch Orgrim move his shoulders to make the muscles on his body more explosive. With a movement of his feet, the ground shattered, and Orgrim's figure turned into a straight line and rushed towards Bartholomew Bear. A simple punch, but extremely powerful. Boom sound. Bartholomew Bear slapped Orgrim's menacing fist. There was a glint in Orgrim's eyes. Damn. This guy can really blow away the power of domineering. The domineering energy that originally covered Orgrim's fist instantly overflowed, and the next moment, a powerful punch hit the flesh pad in Bartholomew Bear's palm hard. It collapsed for a moment, and then, an extremely strong rebound force erupted from Bartholomew Bear's flesh pad. Then, Orgrim was ejected again. The sturdy figure flipped several times in the air, and Orgrim suddenly landed on his feet. Gee ha 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 ha, interesting ability. Orgrim laughed. On the other side, Marshal Warring States also had a glimmer of hope in his eyes, as if, can Bartholomew Bear's ability completely restrain Orgrim's offensive? Although Orgrim was clearly defeated, Bartholomew Bear, the war machine, remained motionless. Perhaps even machines have lost their self-awareness. But he still felt strong pressure from Orgrim and didn't dare to act rashly, right? He didn't go up and punch him again. An inexplicable energy wave flashed in Orgrim's eyes, and then a powerful impact began to gather in his hands. The invisible force of impact continued to condense in Orgrim's hand, and then slowly gathered on the tip of Orgrim's index finger. Soon, a transparent ball the size of a table tennis ball was condensed. Raising his index finger, Orgrim pointed his fingertip at the location of Bartholomew Bear. "Try it and see if you can catch this blow," Orgrim smiled evilly. As soon as he finished speaking, the energy circle on Orgrim's fingertips flew towards the location of Bartholomew Bear. Dragon King's sigh. At the same time, Orgrim also whispered softly. As if responding to Orgrim's whisper, the energy ball that came out of his hand expanded rapidly. In an instant, it seemed like a giant dragon appeared in the sky, sighing softly towards Bartholomew Bear in the void. The next moment, an invisible impact quickly enveloped him. Wherever it passes, the ground is blown up, just like a hurricane passing by, and all objects that stand in front of this power will be destroyed. Bartholomew Bear moved. He was huge, with his arms spread out to the left and right, as if he was hugging something. Then, there was a powerful impact, and it landed in front of him. Just when everyone thought Bartholomew Bear was going to be killed by Orgrim's powerful blow, the invisible impact force actually was stopped. It was as if there was an invisible absolute defensive membrane in front of Bartholomew Bear's open arms and broad chest. All the strong impact force was blocked. Then, watch Bartholomew Bear's arms keep closing. Visible to the naked eye, the surging impact force was forcibly compressed by him. After a while, the impact energy that was originally enough to destroy everything was completely grasped in his hands. Formed a ball of energy like a bear's paw. Blocked. That guy blocked Orgrim's impact. Marco looked at Bartholomew Bear in confusion at this time and said, "That rascal, his ability, very strong." Newgate frowned slightly and commented in a low voice. Newgate has always been proud of his devil fruit ability that can destroy the world. Even in his eyes, any animal type fantasy beast species or any natural type it's rubbish. Only superhumans are truly powerful. And the only top superhumans that he can surpass and think can match his abilities are Shiji's Piafu fruit and Og. It's just the shock fruit of that bastard Reem. Now, Newgate has to admit that the devil fruit ability possessed by Bartholomew Bear, the mysterious king of the Shichibukai, is also not inferior to him. The powerful ability of the Zhen fruit. Top power. Not paying attention to the surprised looks of others, Bartholomew Bear's face was still very calm. He raised his hand and pushed the bear's paw, which was full of impact power. A ball of energy in the shape of a ball flew towards Orgrim. "A bit awesome," Orgrim said softly. The speed of the energy ball was not fast, more like it was floating over. After getting close to Orgrim, Orgrim reached out and poked the bear paw ball lightly. Just like puncturing a balloon, the bear's paw exploded with a pop. At the same time, an unparalleled impact force burst out at this moment. The whole of Marineford trembled, as if it had been punched by this force. The originally transparent energy light became extremely dazzling at this time, and a huge bear paw appeared out of thin air in the explosion. And Orgrim's figure was completely submerged in this energy explosion. The force of the impact spread out one after another, forcing Newgate and others to retreat a certain distance. After the invisible force dispersed, the Sphinx shook his ponytail and looked at the huge crater in the distance with some horror. "Could it be Mr. Hammer? Did you kill yourself?" Hancock slapped the Sphinx on the head and said in a very serious tone, "Lord Orgrim will be fine." When the dust fell, his vision gradually recovered. At this time, everyone on the pirate side also breathed a sigh of relief. Orgrim's tall and muscular figure was still standing in the deep pit. "It seems that it is not affected." Call, Orgrim let out a breath. He is a person with the ability to impact the fruit, so he is naturally very fond of impact power. Especially, the power that Bartholomew Bear brought back came from the same source as him. Therefore, despite the unparalleled impact that instantly submerged him, Orgrim was actually not injured at all. If he hadn't awakened his ability before, he might have been counterattacked, but now, it's simply impossible. Facts have proved that whether it is the power in the fist or the energy in the body, it seems that it is of no use to Bartholomew Bear. This guy can really bounce off anything. However, Orgrim did not feel any pressure. On the contrary, from the beginning to the end, it was Bartholomew Bear who remained in a defensive state and took serious precautions. This war machine may have lost its self-awareness, but its powerful strongman instinct is still constantly alerting him, Orgrim's power. No ability can be perfect, even though this ability is extremely powerful. This is true of Orgrim, and so is Newgate. The same goes for Bartholomew Bear in front of me. From an ability perspective alone, this guy's abilities are truly terrifying. From an ability perspective, there's nothing Orgrim can do against him. However, his flaws are also quite obvious. He is not a Superman like the bouncing fruit. On the contrary, he is just a user with the ability of the meatball fruit. The reason why the fruit is so powerful is because he developed it. And the limitation of his ability is limited to meatballs, just 2 words. Only the meatball in his palm is the basis for his ability. Judging from the speed of his teleportation, he might also have it on the soles of his feet. Therefore, a flash of light flashed in his eyes, and Orgrim's figure disappeared from the place. The next second, he appeared in front of Bartholomew Bear. The big palm fell at an extremely fast speed, as if this emotionless machine wanted to knock Orgrim away. But the moment his slap fell, Orgrim disappeared again. The huge slap fell directly into the air, and Orgrim's figure suddenly appeared in the sky behind Bartholomew Bear. Powerful kick, sweeping out. An electric current seemed to flash under Bartholomew Bear's glasses, as if his combat program was overloaded. You can vaguely see the inexplicable energy spreading under your feet, as if he will disappear from here in the next moment. However, Orgrim's kick is faster. The powerful kick force instantly hit Bartholomew Bear's head, causing his neck to tilt directly with a click. The short-circuit current exploded with many sparks, and Orgrim kicked this fat body to the ground. It was only then that 2 beams of energy popped out from under his feet. Teleport failed. Sure enough, Orgrim grinned and put on a ferocious smile. In the air, 2 shock waves exploded under his feet, and his figure broke through Bartholomew Bear's defense with both hands. Or in other words, eating this powerful blow made Bartholomew Bear's combat routine slightly laggy. In short, his hands tried to swat Orgrim away, but failed. On the contrary, Orgrim had already appeared on his chest. The powerful iron fist penetrated Bartholomew Bear's chest with one blow. Sure enough, after being disemboweled, it was full of complex circuits. The arrogant impact instantly changed from the insertion in the chest to the chest. The fist in his body erupted. In an instant, no one knew how many parts were destroyed. Bartholomew Bear's mouth opened, and a stream of black smoke came out. Under his glasses, several lines of electricity were drawn. Arc, then, this huge body became silent. The war machine named Bartholomew Bear had a malfunction and was temporarily scrapped. He pulled his arm out of the broken metal, and Orgrim said with a ferocious smile, "It seems that he is not really invincible." At the same time, he also felt a little emotional that this would definitely not be Bartholomew Bear's full strength. If his sense of autonomy is still there, you won't be scrapped by yourself so easily. Although this war machine has advantages, there is no doubt that it is too rigid. I don't know what the Navy is thinking. Perhaps, is it because even if some combat power is sacrificed, the Navy hopes to obtain a war machine that can be fully trusted? A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 768. Standing on Bartholomew Bear's corpse. Orgrim still looked very calm and looked towards the navy. At this time, there are few players in the navy lineup who can fight. The warring States Marshal, however, has not taken any action. Apart from the injuries caused by the previous fight with Newgate, there is no other condition. Chief Staff Officer Ahe is in pretty good shape. Among the three generals, Cusin is the only one left. The rest of the people were almost all seriously injured and could be beaten, but it would not be of much use. At this time, Marshal Warring States looked at Orgrim and felt complicated. There is no doubt that Orgrim under the Dark Knight is simply not something they can resist. The Navy had obviously overestimated his strength as much as possible, but in the end, when they actually met him, they still underestimated him. This also led to one thing: the entire war was crushed by Orgrim alone. Although I still have myself, Ahe, and Cusin on my side. But obviously, this battle has already been decided. Whether he admits it or not, Orgrim, after all, single-handedly defeated the top forces of their naval headquarters. Emotionally speaking, the Generalissimo is very eager to take action now. Even if I risk my life, I have to fight Orgrim. But rationally speaking, the Warring States Marshal knew very well that he had better not take action again. Give the Navy's top strength a little cushion. If the Navy's top forces are not to be hospitalized collectively for a year and a half, then the Navy will face even more problems in the future. No matter what, we must leave some vitality to the Navy. Snap, snap, snap. A burst of crisp applause came from behind the Warring States Marshal. The Warring States Marshal was shocked. He didn't even notice that there was someone behind him. Even though he didn't participate in the battle, he was actually watching the battle attentively, and he was always on alert, for fear that Orgrim might try to trick him. But just like that, he didn't notice someone approaching from behind. He suddenly looked back and saw that he didn't recognize her, but it was the little girl who had knocked Orgrim out of the Fortress of Justice before. It was a really fun fight and I had a blast watching it. Lord Yumu chuckled. As soon as she finished speaking, she tilted her head slightly, looked at the tall Warring States Marshal beside her, and said softly, "You are the Navy Marshal of the session, right? I recognize you. Call, call." Warring States period. The Warring States Marshal frowned and responded. Although he didn't know clearly what was going on with this little girl. But this little girl came with Wulaoxing. At the same time, judging from the current situation, it seems that she is on the same side as herself. Therefore, in this case, he is naturally willing to show kindness first. Yes, yes, it's called Warring States. It's a really strange name. Lord Im said with a smile. Before Marshal Warring States could speak, Lord Im paused for a moment and then continued, "Your navy has lost. It is so incompetent. It is also known as the Overlord of the Sea. It has gathered the most complete top masters in the world. However, for decades or hundreds of years, no one has been able to truly break through to the limit of power, so disappointing." The Marshal of the Warring States period felt very helpless when he said this. Because these words are really a slap in the face. The Navy, known as the Overlord of the Sea, has a mature training system and has always produced masters in large numbers. Among the major forces on the sea, it has always been the Overlord level force with the largest number of top-level experts. This time, the number of experts is far higher than before. But even so, it still failed to give birth to a strong man who has reached the limit. So, Orgrim alone rule the roost. Worse than a pirate, Lord Im's voice fell slowly, but his eyes looked at Orgrim in the distance. Lord Im was watching the fun until dark. Even if the Navy is at an absolute disadvantage, as the king of the world, she has no intention of helping. Maybe she really doesn't care about the Navy or anything like that. Before the night fell, Although Orgrim performed quite strongly and fully lived up to his reputation as the strongest, in fact, Lord Im did not pay special attention to him. Instead, she has been waiting for the night to fall, waiting for the legendary king of the night, Hosgarot Orgrim, to appear in his full glory. Then, she saw it. If we say that in daylight, the navy is still capable of fighting. At that time of night, it could be said that they had almost no power to fight back. Orgrim crushed them face to face with overwhelming power. During this period, Lord Im also confirmed one thing, that is, Hosgarot Orgrim, known as the King of the Night, is indeed a person like her who has stood at the end of power and reached the other side. The strong one. Although Orgrim did not fully demonstrate this power in the battle with the navy. But undoubtedly, that is because the navy is too weak and does not need this kind of power at all, not because Orgrim cannot reach it. Vaguely, Im saw from Orgrim's body the ultimate power that touched the world's barrier. This is the person she has been waiting for. Someone who can bring fun to her. If the navy loses, then let's withdraw from the new world as agreed, Lord Im said softly. Marshal Warring States frowned, although he had no choice but to admit that this should be the end of the navy. However, he didn't want to be given orders in such a commanding tone. Therefore, even though he felt that this little girl's identity might be very special and her status was quite high, he did not respond. Fortunately, Lord Im didn't seem to want to hear his response. She smiled and walked towards the direction of Orgrim. Need to introduce yourself? Lord Im said with a smile. Different from talking to the naval marshal of warring states and even the 5 old stars, do you think when did Im want to introduce her thoughts to Marshal Warring States? Not at all, she didn't even talk to Warring States Marshal. She couldn't remember what it was called. This undoubtedly proved that the Warring States period was nothing in her heart. Before, when she met Orgrim, she had no intention of introducing herself. But now, Lord Im a gesture of equality, communicating with Orgrim. Sure enough, in her eyes, power and status are not capital at all, only her own strength, or in other words, fun is what matters to her. Orgrim slowly stepped down from Bartholomew Bear's body. He stretched out his hand and grabbed it, and in the distance, a hot breath came from the ruins. Then, the doom hammer rose into the air, broke away from the ruins, and flew into Orgrim's hands. Only then did Orgrim smile and say, at first, I thought you were my fan, until you punched me. Speaking of this, Orgrim paused for a moment, and then continued, Lord Im, right? According to legend, the one who is at the top of the world, king of the world. Listening to Orgrim's response, Lord Im had a bright smile on his face, nodded, and said in a very polite tone, Marcella Claudius Im, of course, you just call me Im. You are qualified to call me that. Marcella Claudius, Orgrim frowned. Among the 20 kings, there is no one with this name. Even among the 19 celestial dragon families of Marijoa, there is no family with such a surname. But soon, Orgrim's brows relaxed again. Why bother with this guy's last name? Just know that she is Im, that's all. To be honest, I have heard about you for a long time, but for all these years, I have always thought that you were a man. Orgrim said with a smile. This is really rude, Lord Im said with a smile. But he didn't care about Orgrim's discourtesy at all. Indeed, Orgrim had always thought that Lord Im was a dark, ambitious man with a strong desire for power, hiding in behind the scenes. There is an old man who is sneaking around and using some dishonorable means to control the world. But the result is a little girl who looks to be in her 20s and seems to have no interest in things like power and status. The contrast in the image, it really surprised him. But, thinking about it now, it's not unacceptable. After all, it was just his imagination before, and the facts are before him. Why? Do you want to unite with the 5 old stars to deal with me? Lord Im tilted his head and asked with a smile. He even looked a little cute. Orgrim also smiled, and then said softly, power, status, wealth, desire. These factors shave it, it's where the interests lie. Lord Im nodded. He was a little confused at first, and then said with some clarity, ah, that's right. After all, you are still young. I'm over 40, Orgrim wanted to complain. He was ready to finish this fight and go back to his hometown to get married. Ahem, no, I have returned to my hometown to retire, and I want to leave the time to young people. As a result, Master Im said he was still young when he came up. Alas, the key point is that I can't refute it. After all, compared to this old monster, Orgrim is really just a young man. When I was young, I was also keen on these things like you, power, wealth, status, and fame. Ah, that's really a nostalgic time, Lord Yumu said with a trace of reminiscence in his eyes. Even Wulaoxing and others are pursuing these. But Lord Yumu will not say that, like them, only Orgrim is qualified to be comment like this. Later, you have it all. Orgrim continued. The trace of reminiscence in Lord Im's eyes dissipated, and he smiled and nodded. Of course, I have them all. For people like you and me, these are nothing, something that is difficult to obtain. Believe me, it will happen soon. It won't take too long, 100 years or at most 200 years, you're gonna get tired of this. I still don't know if I can live for so many years, Orgrim complained this time. Ha 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 ha, you will. Eternal life is not something that is difficult to obtain for us. Of course, I really hate this kind of thing now. The more immortal I am, the lonelier I feel, Lord Im laughed and said. You are really arrogant. Is it because you have eternal life that you say this? There are countless people on the sea who want to experience your troubles, Orgrim smiled and said. Well, there's nothing wrong with being arrogant, right? But you're right, it's a luxurious worry, Lord Im still said with a smile. After a moment of silence, Orgrim suddenly asked, do you really have eternal life? Are the fruits of the surgery really so powerful? Lord Im frowned slightly, for the first time. He looked a little unhappy, but quickly nodded and said, yes, I do have eternal life, but the fruit of the surgery? Is that kind of power worthy of being called eternal life? Orgrim. According to legend, didn't you gain the power of immortality because of the fruit of the operation? What does it mean? Are you all lying to me? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 769. The fruit of surgery is currently the only means of immortality that Orgrim has in his hands. Of course, Orgrim had no intention of using this method. On the one hand, it is because he is still young, at least he thinks he is still young. In particular, his physical fitness is excellent. Even though he is over 40, he still looks energetic and does not appear to be aging. On the other hand, this method would sacrifice Nightingale. Nightingale was an old subordinate of Orgrim and had a deep affection. How could Orgrim do such a thing? Therefore, it cannot be said that there is no pursuit of eternal life, but in fact, Orgrim would rather use something like pure gold to achieve his goal. But in any case, before, the fruit of surgery has always been regarded by them as the power that can make people immortal. Didn't you see that the 5 old stars all snatched this thing from Orgrim? Later, Orgrim also talked about this thing with Wulaoxing. Wulaoxing also clearly stated that the fruit of this operation can make people immortal. Moreover, both inside and outside the words, there is a precedent to follow. This precedent, isn't it you Im? Why are you suddenly retorting now? Could it be that the fruit of the operation is a scam that has been going on for hundreds of years? Thinking of this, Orgrim couldn't help but ask, didn't you gain immortality because of the surgical fruit? The surgical fruit cannot make people immortal? Is this a scam? Lord Im frowned slightly, as if he was trying to organize his words. Similarly, after thinking about it, she said, I did not gain immortality because of the fruit of surgery. This is certain. As for whether the fruit of surgery can make people immortal, well, in my opinion, it shouldn't be. How should I put it? Immortality and aging are two different things. Do you understand? A scam can also be called a scam, right? I don't know who is spreading rumors about this. Orgrim. Immortality and aging? He suddenly understood something and said in a deep voice, will the immortality brought by the fruit of the surgery prevent aging? Of course, what I saw with my own eyes was probably 400 or 500 years ago. Lord Im nodded. When he said this, he turned to look at the bald king in the distance. Then he continued, there is an equally ambitious 5 old stars, he used this power and then, in the end, he begged me to kill him to be relieved. If the fruit of the surgery really can't stop aging, then to be honest, what this fruit brings is not immortality. It's such a curse. Your body is so old that you can't move, and your whole body is filled with a rotten aura. But why? If you still can't die, there is a power that keeps you alive, like a walking zombie. This is really a sad story. At the same time, Orgrim also looked at Lord Im with some scrutiny in his eyes. Since it is not the fruit of surgery, could it be pure gold? But I didn't wear any jewelry either. Ah, no, the birth of pure gold is not as old as this old monster. Before the birth of pure gold, she had already obtained the power of eternal life. Lord Im also seemed to notice Orgrim's observation, and said with a smile, are you curious about what power I used to obtain eternal life? Orgrim nodded very frankly and said, of course I'm curious. I thought you were the first person to use the surgical fruit to gain this kind of power. The 5 old stars also told me this before. What can they know about me? What they can learn are all insignificant things, and even more are rude speculations accumulated over generations. Master Im waved his hand and said very casually. After a slight pause, Master Im said softly, on the sea, there are not just 1 or 2 means of immortality. Maybe for others, it is unusual to find them. It's difficult, but for people like you and me, it's not that challenging. I think you should already have some ideas and plans, right? After all, when strength and power reach a certain level, all intelligent creatures will look for ways to extend their lifespan. What Lord Im said does make sense. Although Orgrim is not in a hurry, he does already have ideas and plans, such as pure gold. However, Lord Im had no intention of listening to Orgrim's answer, and continued to talk to himself. The legendary Millennium Dragon, the surgical fruit in your mouth, was researched by alchemists more than 200 years ago. Pure gold, these are the means to obtain eternal life. After that, while thinking about it, Lord Im said a lot of secrets about eternal life. After listening for a while, Orgrim frowned slightly and said, so, how did you obtain immortality? Fountain of youth. Lord Im listened to Orgrim's words, and after a moment of silence, he answered the question calmly. Orgrim's eyes lit up and he whispered, is there really such a magical spring? Why not? Lord Im smiled and said. Before Orgrim asked, Lord Im said very generously, the fountain of youth, this is an unexplainable magical spring. The spring water contains unimaginable water, the terrifying vitality. Anyone who drinks this spring water will be rejuvenated and reach the healthiest and most prosperous state of life. From then on, they will live forever and never die. Where is this fountain of youth? Orgrim quickly asked. Lord Im smiled, shook his head and said, it is said that a person can only see the spring once in his life. I have already seen it, so I will never see it again. It is impossible to see it again. It is not a dead thing fixed on a certain island. On the contrary, it is a real living mystery. Everything depends on fate. Orgrim, maybe one day you will wake up from your sleep. Open your eyes, this spring water is right next to your bed, isn't it necessarily right? Orgrim felt a bit toothache after hearing this answer. To put it simply, the fountain of youth is alive and can run around. No one can catch it anywhere. If you want to obtain its power and gain eternal life, it depends on fate. If you are lucky, you might find the fountain of youth next to your bed when you wake up. If my life is not good, I will probably never see the spring in my life. Judging from the current situation, I am afraid that only one person has seen this legendary fountain of youth in more than 800 years, that's right, it's this guy I'm. Thinking of this, there was something wrong with the way Orgrim looked at I'm. The same is true for people, but the gap between people is too big, right? Think about it carefully, isn't this Lord I'm just living with the template and script of the protagonist? There is no doubt that although I don't know what her previous name was, she must be one of the 20 kings. In other words, more than 800 years ago, even if there were no world nobles like the celestial dragons, I'm was still in the royal family when he was born, and successfully inherited the throne. There is a world of difference between him and a guy like Orgrim. Then, she and the other 19 kings formed an alliance and conquered a huge kingdom with advanced ideas. Well, regarding her war, she won it. Then, 19 kings died one after another, but she, I'm, bumped into the fountain of youth. This is crazy. Then, she set off her own craze within the world government. Eventually, through dictatorship and centralization, the world government became the largest behemoth in the world. This regime lasted for 800 years. I'm Sama, who was tired of power, wealth, status, and fame, started her gaming life after getting tired of playing world government. Until now. You also said you are not the protagonist? After dispelling all the envy, jealousy, and hatred in his heart, Orgrim said unhappily, then you are really lucky. Yeah? Yes, Lord I'm nodded very normally and said, I have always been very lucky. After a slight pause, Lord I'm looked at Orgrim with a bright smile on his face. Said, for example, I met you when I was the most bored in the past 800 years. As she finished speaking, Orgrim was keenly aware that something was wrong. There's something wrong with the atmosphere, there's a vague murderous aura. Squeezing the handle of the war hammer in his hand, Orgrim said in a deep voice, I am a family man. I'm. She was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, ha 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 ha, what did you take me for? Do you think too highly of yourself? After laughing, Lord I'm carefully looked at Orgrim's face, and finally shook his head and said, no, your appearance is not within my hunting range, too ugly. Orgrim's face stiffened and he said, what is ugly? In the past 800 years, your aesthetics have been deformed, right? I am masculine and heroic. Lord I'm was still laughing, waving his hands and saying, maybe, masculine and heroic. But it's not my type anyway. People like me like that kind of feeling, how to say it, yes, pretty boy. As he spoke, Lord I'm looked around, then pointed in a direction in the distance and said, hey, do you see a guy like that? He's my favorite type. Orgrim followed the direction Lord I'm pointed, glanced over, and then was stunned for a moment. And dressed. His face froze, he turned to look at Lord I'm and said, that's my son. I'm. Lord I'm looked surprised, and even felt a little unbelievable. Your son? Dear. Lord I'm couldn't help but ask. Orgrim's face darkened and he said, if you want to fight, just say so. It seems that she is biological. How beautiful must your wife be, Lord I'm said with great emotion. Orgrim felt that the fire in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. At this moment, Lord I'm put away his smile and teasing, looked at Orgrim and said, King of the Night, your power has indeed touched the limits of the world. For so many years, I have been looking for someone like him. People like you. What do you do with someone like me? Orgrim asked in a deep voice. Experience what it feels like to fail. I'm said softly. After a slight pause, She put on a bright smile and said, I am always victorious and undefeated, and I want to experience the feeling of failure. Can you do it? Gee ha 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 ha, my good time, ahem, I, Orgrim, like to attack those of you who think you have outstanding abilities. Orgrim laughed. As soon as he finished speaking, Orgrim's momentum became as fierce as a tiger descending from a mountain. He swept towards Lord Yumu not far away in front of him. At the same time, Yumu the adult raised the corner of her mouth and put on a slight smile. Just when Orgrim's ferocious aura was about to sweep over her, a very strong aura also erupted from her body. It was different from Orgrim's. Fierce and violent. This momentum seems very quiet and calm. But high above, like a god looking down on the world. King of the world. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 770. Orgrim's aura was savage and ferocious. Everyone's momentum is related to his experiences along the way. Orgrim truly climbed up step by step from the bottom. Therefore, his aura is wild and arrogant, and he also believes in ruthlessness as a person. Lady Im's aura is different. She is the one standing in the clouds from the beginning. In this life, both feet may not have been in the mud. Therefore, her aura was that of being high and majestic, like a god. The moment the two momentums collided, Orgrim moved. He didn't know how strong Lord Im was, but he should always treat this kind of old monster who has lived for 800 years and even opened the protagonist template with the most caution. Strike first to gain the upper hand. And once you take action, use all your strength. With a sudden force under his feet, the warhammer in his hand flipped over instantly, and in the blink of an eye, a flower shadow emerged. In an instant, Orgrim appeared in front of Lord Im. The top of the warhammer, with a very strong impact, hit Lord Im's head with an unceremonious hammer. 80, Orgrim roared angrily. Lady Yumu did not avoid it, as if she wanted to truly experience Orgrim's power firsthand. The white palms instantly became extremely dark, and a lingering feeling lingered on the palms. The invisible power quickly solidified. Armed and domineering. He raised his hand, and the slender white palm accurately touched the head of the warhammer. The powerful impact force exploded in an instant, and the head rope of Master Yumu was blown away directly, and then, her long black hair was fluttering in the wind, looking extremely unruly in the strong impact. Feeling the pressure from her hand, Master Im's eyes were filled with tears. There was a flash of light, and the ground under her feet exploded in an instant. Yes, it was this kind of power that could make her even have to go all out to resist the powerful force. The impact force was wrapped with armed domineering, and the palm came into contact with the warhammer. As the ground rose, the space continued to crack. When the two people's strength was condensed to the extreme, a violent explosion suddenly occurred in the space. The powerful turbulence lifted Orgrim away. And Lord Im was also lifted by this force. After rolling twice in the air, his feet suddenly landed on the ground. His figure was extremely calm. Without any pause, the warhammer in Orgrim's hand became hot, and in the blink of an eye, it burned extremely red. At the same time, looking at Lord Im in the distance who also landed firmly, Orgrim grinned and pointed the warhammer in his hand over there. The strong impact force came from Orgrim's body. Emerged out, and in just a moment, they all gathered on the hammer of destruction. Waves of faint sounds of dragon roars overflowed from the hammer. The rich impact force turned into a wave of energy swimming on the hammer. Dragon. Roar of the Dragon King, Orgrim chuckled softly. At the same time as his voice fell, the dragon wandering on the warhammer seemed to have lost its shackles and restraints. In an instant, it escaped from the warhammer. Then, the condensed impact force quickly expanded into a giant dragon, roaring and sweeping towards Lord Im. At the same time, the scorching breath from the warhammer continued to gather within the dragon's body, causing the force of the impact to carry an extremely high temperature. Wherever it passed, the air was distorted by the high temperature. Lord Im doesn't seem to have much ability. Think about it, although devil fruit can give people very powerful and magical power, it also comes at a heavy price. Especially the fear of sea water. And how could a person like Lord Im, who was born above the clouds, put shackles on himself just because he wanted to gain power? Looking at the roaring dragon, Lord Im still had a smile on his face. She gently raised one of her arms and squeezed her fist. Then, the dark domineering energy covered her fist. Deeper, the power that Wano country called flowing sakura covered her whole body. Shrouded in. Just when the ferocious dragon roared and tried to swallow Lord Im in one gulp, she took action. With a step of his foot, he jumped up on the spot, just right, a little higher than the dragon's head. The next moment, Lord Im punched down. The punch, packed with extremely powerful domineering force, hit the ferocious dragon's head hard. The force of impact that gathered together was instantly defeated by this force. Like a living creature, the giant dragon howled and exploded with a bang. The strong impact force swept out in all directions with the explosion. The smoke and dust raised by the explosion obscured everyone's sight. But before Orgrim could envelope him with his domineering aura, Master Yumu, with his long hair blowing in the wind behind him, rushed out of the smoke at an extremely fast speed. How fast? It was so fast that with Orgrim's current eyesight, he almost failed to catch her figure. It was as if she had broken through space and time. She was supposed to be in front of him, but he walked in front of her. There were no fancy moves. Lord Im's eyes were filled with excitement, and he punched Orgrim in the chest with a simple punch. He crossed his arms in front of his chest in the shape of a cross, and was instantly covered by the domineering power of his armor. When Master Im's fist hit Orgrim's arm, he responded with domineering force and exploded at the same time. The space split open immediately, and at the same time, dark lightning exploded around the two of them. The ground beneath Orgrim's feet instantly turned into powder, and at the same moment, it seemed as if the entire Marineford was shaking. In the sky, the clouds continued to lower, and there was lightning and thunder. It was as if a storm was beginning to gather. Click. He vaguely heard the sound of something breaking, and there was a cruel look in Orgrim's eyes. He knew that the bones of his arm were cracked and stuck. What made him feel even more stressed was that in terms of domineering power, although he could not be said to be completely abused by Lord Im, it was obvious that there was a huge gap between him and her. Sure enough, the power of domineering is just grinded out bit by bit through hard work. Lord Im has lived for so many years and has no other advantages. He is so domineering and ridiculously strong. In this case, it would be unwise to confront her in terms of domineering power. At the same time, Orgrim also discovered some of its own advantages. Strength advantage: Lord Im's physical strength is not as powerful as Orgrim's. Open, Orgrim roared angrily. The muscles on the shoulders of both arms suddenly swelled, the meridians surged, and both hands exerted force at the same time. With the advantage of his body strength, Orgrim took away Lord Im's hand. Boxing. At the same moment, he raised his hands above his head, hugged each other directly, struck hard, and then fell from top to bottom. With the force of a falling hammer, he smashed it towards Master Yumu's Tianling cap. Master! Yumu thought without thinking too much. Her feet loosened and the figure took a step back. The fist held by Orgrim's hands grazed her chest, missed, and hit the ground with a hammer. This time, Malinfuda, she really trembled. Huge power and impact instantly erupted from Orgrim's hands and penetrated directly into the depths of Marineford. The ground collapsed instantly, and a huge crack spread out from here. In the blink of an eye, it destroyed the location of the Fortress of Justice. Then, watching the Fortress of Justice, which had stood for hundreds of years, be invaded by this force, the thick and solid barrier seemed to have a centipede-like crack, extending directly from the bottom to the top, tearing the entire Fortress of Justice from the middle. Everyone in Marineford felt a shock under their feet and almost fell to the ground. "The glacier has cracked," a rear admiral exclaimed. Sure enough, the aftermath of Orgrim's full punch also affected Marineford's Crescent Harbor. The glaciers in the harbor were constantly shattering, as if a mirror had fallen on it. "It's the same as on the ground. As Orgrim said before, ancient weapons like Pluto are really nothing. Because there are many top masters who can destroy the island with one blow. For example, Newgate, and another example, this is Orgrim. If this blow was really aimed at Marineford, Marineford might really be sunk by Orgrim." At this time, Orgrim smashed his fists on the ground with his hands, and his waist was bent, and the center of gravity of the body was also lowered. Therefore, Master Yumu, who had dodged the punch, jumped up with the force of the counter-attack from the ground, and struck Orgrim with a sweeping blow. Was kicked out on the head. Without dodging, Orgrim had a look in his eyes. Not only did he not dodge, but he flicked his head and bumped into Master Im's kick. There was a loud bang. A stream of blood overflowed from Orgrim's forehead. His eyes were filled with stars and his head was a little dizzy. However, he seemed to have been prepared for this. When the kick hit his head, he also pulled his arm out from under the ground. He tilted his head and briefly caught Lord Im's kick. He grabbed her calf. Real feeling comes from the hand, got it? At the same time, the stars in his eyes dispersed, his vision returned to clarity, and the dizzy feeling in his head also subsided. Sure enough, he grabbed Master Im's calf. With a sudden force in his hand, he lifted Lord Im up. Then, without saying a word, Orgrim, just like a sledgehammer, swung the figure of Lord Im and smashed it to the ground. Boom, there was another loud noise. And Lord Im was directly pressed into the ground by Orgrim. The powerful impact and counter-attack force instantly dispersed the domineering power she used. Before she could stand up, Orgrim's sandbag-sized fist had already hit her head. The powerful impact instantly knocked her head hard on the solid ground again, and then, the raging force enveloped her figure, scraping the ground and rolling out. After knocking down Lord Im with one punch, Orgrim smiled evilly and said, "It's not that bad either. Have you experienced the feeling of being beaten and defeated? Yumu is very strong. That incredibly powerful domineering power can defeat all his armed and domineering forces in a very short time. You can imagine how strong this must be? But I don't know if it is Yumu. The adults haven't done anything to anyone for a long time, or maybe it's because her status is too high, she doesn't have much practical experience." Orgrim didn't know the reason, but he could feel that Im was like a child with powerful power before. Can't use force. He was a little scornful at first, but soon Orgrim regained his composure. Impossible. This guy is an old monster who has lived for 800 years. How could he not use power? And judging from her speech and behavior, she is not a brainless guy. It's even more impossible to be unaware of this flaw. Just as Orgrim was thinking about these questions, the figure of Lord Im slowly climbed up from the ground. "It hurts, Orgrim," Lord Im said while covering his head.